So, what is justice? I mean, really, it's a question that philosophers have been wrestling with for, well, forever. And one of the most powerful, most elegant answers comes from way back in ancient Greece, from Plato. Today, we're going to dive into his big idea and see how he connects the balance of an entire nation to the harmony inside every single one of us.
To get to his answer, Plato basically takes us on this incredible intellectual journey in his famous book, The Republic. And the cool thing is, he doesn't just hand us a definition on a silver platter. Nope, he builds an entire world from the ground up just to show us what true justice looks like when it's put into practice.
So let's start right where he did, with this massive puzzle. What does it actually mean for a person, or even a whole society, to be just? It sounds simple enough, right? But believe me, the more you poke at it, the slipperier it gets.
Now, before he could build up his own theory, Plato first had to clear the table of some common ideas that were floating around back then, and he pretty systematically tears them down. Giving each person what is due? Okay, but what if a friend who's gone insane asks for his weapons back? Do you give them to him? Helping friends and harming enemies? But what if your friends are terrible people and your enemies are actually decent? And the rule of the stronger. For Plato, that was just a fancy term for tyranny, not justice at all.
And this is where Plato gets really clever. He says, look, trying to figure out justice by looking at one person is like trying to read tiny, tiny letters from way across the room. It's almost impossible. So to see it clearly, what do? We need to look at a much bigger version first. We need to look at the state. For Plato, the state is basically the human soul, just writ large.
All right, so following his method, our first stop is the ideal state. Plato literally builds a perfectly just society from scratch, and it's not based on who has the most money or the biggest army. It's based on human nature itself.
He argues that any well-functioning society naturally has three essential parts. You've got the rulers at the top. These are the super-wise philosopher kings who guide everything. Then you have the auxiliaries. They're the brave soldiers who protect the state. And finally, you have the producers, the farmers, the craftspeople, the ones who make everything society needs to survive.
And here's the crucial part. Each class has a very specific job to do, and a specific virtue that helps them do it. The rulers lead with wisdom. The auxiliaries defend with courage, and the producers provide for everyone with temperance, or, self-control, making sure everyone's needs are met without things getting out of hand. It's all about perfect functional specialization.
So this brings us to Plato's first huge conclusion. Justice in a state isn't just a list of laws. It's more like an organic harmony. It's that beautiful, efficient music that happens when the rulers rule, the auxiliaries defend, and the producers produce, and nobody tries to do someone else's job.
Okay, so we've seen justice on this grand societal scale. Now Plato tells us to zoom all the way back in to the individual. Because, he argues, that same exact three-part structure exists inside every single one of us.
He called it the tripartite theory of the soul. It's a fancy name, but the idea is actually pretty intuitive. Our inner self, our soul, isn't just one thing. It's actually made up of three distinct parts, and each one has its own drives and its own desires.
Starting to look familiar? Just like the state, our soul has three parts. There's reason. That's our logical side that loves truth and makes decisions, and it's guided by wisdom. Then there's spirit, which is our emotional core. Think honor, ambition, anger, and it's all about courage. And finally, there's appetite. This is the part that wants all the stuff, food, drink, money, you name it, and it needs to be managed by temperance.
And here it is. This is the big aha moment of Plato's entire argument. The three classes of the state map perfectly onto the three parts of the soul. The wise rulers, that's your reason. The courageous auxiliaries, that's your spirit. And the hardworking producers, yep, that's your appetites.
So what this means is that for Plato, being a just person isn't really about your outward actions. It's about your inner order. A person is just when their reason is in the driver's seat, making the wise choices. Their spirit acts like a loyal guard dog, giving them the courage to follow through. And their appetites, they're in the back seat, behaving themselves and obeying the commands of reason.
This one quote just nails the whole thing. It perfectly sums up his entire theory. It doesn't matter if you're talking about a social class or a part of your own soul. For Plato, justice is about doing your job, playing your part, and keeping everything in a perfect, harmonious balance.
Okay, this is all a really neat and tidy theory, but so what? Why does any of this actually matter? Well, Plato's ultimate point wasn't just to define some abstract word. He wanted to connect justice to the one thing we are all chasing, a good, happy life.
You see, for Plato, justice isn't some kind of terrible sacrifice you have to make. It's the exact opposite. It's the direct road to flourishing. A just soul is a healthy soul, one that's at peace with itself, free from all that inner conflict. A just state is stable, it's unified, it's prosperous. Ultimately, Plato's big claim is that the just person is always, without fail, happier than the unjust person.
Now, this is a beautiful and really compelling vision of the world. But it's not perfect, and over the last 2,400 years, it has faced some pretty serious criticisms. So let's take a fair look at its legacy, the good and the bad.
A lot of critics will say, look, this whole ideal state thing sounds nice, but it's completely utopian and impractical in the real world. But a more serious charge is that it seems to completely sacrifice individual freedom for the good of the whole society. There's no moving between classes. Your place in life is basically fixed. This has led some people, like the famous philosopher Karl Popper, to call it a blueprint for totalitarianism. It's all about your duty to the state, with almost no mention of individual rights.
And yet, despite those really powerful criticisms, you just can't deny this theory's impact. Think about it. In a world that often saw justice as just might makes right, Plato's idea that it was a core moral virtue was revolutionary. He was the one who forged that unbreakable link between personal ethics and political health. And his ideas about harmony and specialization have echoed down through Western philosophy ever since. And that leaves us with a huge, timeless question that Plato forces us to wrestle with. One that's just as real for us today as it was in ancient Athens. In our own search for a perfect, stable, and harmonious society, what's the right balance between the good of the group and the freedom of the individual? It's something worth thinking about.